Hello, and nice to meet you in person, finally. um, so, I quite like when I receive biographies from artists and I give a very limited amount of words and they come out with the most poetic sentences. So Geert Goiris travels the world seeking out unusual places and interpreting them in enigmatic images. Despite the high resolution afforded to his large format film camera, his images don't overwhelm us with definitive information. They are intentionally unpinned from a specific era, giving the feeling that we could be simultaneously looking at the past and the future. And in fact, indeed, your images escape any conventional notion of space and time. And they made me think of what Sigmund Freud defined psychical reality. But even before we even opened the book with this kind of daunting black cover and the red title, World Without Us, which has both notions of familiarity, obviously us, but also alienation, without us. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your the existential motives and behind your research and your practice. Thank you.
As you already mentioned in the biography, this sentence like that might typify some of my images, that you could both be looking at the future or at the past. I'm very interested in this kind of strange temporal structures or unusual temporal structures. And coming back to Freud, what you said, he also talked about the uncanny, das Unheimliche, where he finds the strange within the ordinary. So there is already a kind of, there is a proximity, there is something that we know, and at the same time there's a detachment. And for me, photography is very much like that. It brings things close to us, but at the same time it kind of alienates us. There is always this dynamic between distance and proximity. And it continues to be one of the intriguing characteristics of photography to me. And there is already, like, in the very origin of a photographic image, there is something quite uncanny because it's hidden. Like it appears into the black box. Sorry, and it's kind of hidden from vision. And this it's automated, and this already influenced or inspired surrealists, for example, a lot. And if you combine this quality with the fact that photography can stop or arrest motion,
Reality.
it can stop time, then we are talking about a medium that has almost magical properties, I think.
Yeah, and in fact, because the project is clearly motivated also by environmental issues, the fear of really mass extinction on planet Earth. I was wondering how you talk often about this traumatic realism. How, what kind of audience or viewer or spectator you have in mind, or you hope to have in mind when you make your work, in a way? Do you want to shock them? Do you want to shake them, awake them somehow?
No, I don't think I want to shock them, but I do try to make images that that defer a kind of easy reading. I try to offer images that are maybe destabilizing your viewing experience. And when I describe traumatic realism, it's like a crack in the mundane. You have like the kind of the continuous tone, and all of a sudden there's a rupture. And the realism is clearly coming from the camera that records whatever is in front of it, whatever the world gives to the camera. And the trauma would be like the kind of micro-narrative, my imagination. If I'm standing in front of a scene and I want to photograph it, I'm going towards that scene and I approach it in a way that is filtered through other images I've seen, or cinema, or like fiction. Very often it's fiction.
Yeah, in this case, there are some excerpts in the book from this fascinating novel called Shark Drunk by Morten Stroxenes.
Morten Stroxenes, yeah.
How did you relate this literary work with your practice? Why this novel?
Well, first of all, I think it's a fantastic story of a man that is going to hunt a Greenlandic whale, which is a creature that can live up to 500 years. It's almost never spotted, but it does exist. And he's there like every day when the weather allows. He's there on this fjord trying to catch this creature that has mythical proportions, and he never gets to see it.
And
now I've spoiled it, of course, but he never gets to see it. But while he's on the water, looking at the environment and kind of slowing down, because he's with a friend of him, a fisherman who has spent his whole life around that fjord. While they're there, their kind of conversations take on a philosophical approach, and they reflect on things as light. And for example, there is one really fascinating fact that he tells, like, you know that in the deep sea, which was complete unknown territory for humans, like 100 years ago, nobody knew anything. 50 years ago, like still today, the knowledge is quite scarce. So it's pitch black there, and there is a lot of creatures that use light to communicate, to find a mate, or to catch prey, or to. And if you look at the planet and you see that most of it is covered by oceans, in fact, this type of communication through light signals is the most used language, is the most used communication. And I thought that it was fascinating, and of course I'm working with light, being a photographer. So I contacted him and I asked if I could use the sentence in the book, and he said, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And also I was wondering, because when you look at your book, which is published by Roma, and you collaborated with the publisher heavily, I guess, it's fascinating how your super diverse style that incorporates, portraiture, landscape, interior, architecture. Some images are much more disturbing, some others are quiet, more enigmatic. It's almost as if this sort of like schizophrenic diversity, it all come very harmoniously in the book. So I was wondering, what was if you had a secret formula for composition in bookmaking, or if you had an advice in terms of what would be your advice to a young artist making their first book? Based on, I personally think you're very gifted in really giving chaos a harmony, in a way.
I don't have a formula. I don't think a formula like that would exist, because of course if the formula would work today, it would not work tomorrow. I think it depends very much of the context, and an audience is very diverse. But I think what is key is like try to bring a life into the work, and through that life then things do connect, I guess. And yes, there are different genres like portraiture, landscape, interior, exterior, but in the end I don't think these things matter. I think it's about a kind of communication. And what I try to do in The World Without Us is, we all know that we see the news every day, and we're a society very much in danger, and all of a sudden there is this massive awareness of that the end might be near, which is of course not a new thing. I mean, the fossils below our feet prove that things can end like that, and extinction is part of a cycle. But what I wanted to do is not exactly show the ecological disaster, but I wanted to show this perception, living under this perception, okay, we are the ones to blame, we should change some things, we know that, but at the same time, we're living at the end of something. How does that color the way you look at the world? And then I think, if I try to adopt that kind of perception, and then I don't think it matters whether you look at a piece of rock or you look at an interior or a portrait. I think if you get that, if you try to to thematize the filter or show the filter more than what exactly you're looking at. And then, of course, we made some, like these images. We made some decisions before we started the actual editing process, like these rock
The
images.
dark clouds.
Yes,
Yeah.
they are meant to kind of to break up the narrative, as a kind of jamming station. So you go through the narrative, but you're always pulled out. And I think that's important. It's not that I'm just putting like a random amount of images on the table and then shuffle them and make a book, but I'm trying quite carefully to build up a sequence, to build up a kind of, let's say,
Climax?
a kind of a narrative direction, and then break it and then go again. So I think, and I hope that when the viewer goes through this book, that in the end you will realize that, well, I have to make my own story. Every viewer, and that's of course a very obvious thing to say, but that's the reason of inserting these other type of images. And then there's text and there's some video stills, and to translate a little bit of the exhibition praxis as well into the book.
Yeah, yeah, there are videos. Is there any question from the public to Geert? Yes. I'll give it.
If your images are devoid of a sense of place, how do you decide where you're going to travel to? What determines your images? You said your images are devoid of a sense of place. So how do you decide where to go to take your images?
Sometimes it's pragmatic. If I have an exhibition somewhere and I need to travel there, I would take a few days extra and then travel in that region. But if I'm really free, then I would go to places, either places I don't know anything of, and it could even be just the name of the place that sounds musical or nice or like something that catches my attention. Or I go to a specific area that I've seen images of before, but I try not to do too much research before going. It's like I can be attracted by one image and then I go like, where is that? And then I travel there. Because I found that even if I plan it, let's say I have a specific location, I would go there, I would make the photographs, but from that trip, most often the one that I retain from that trip would be made somewhere along the road or when I least expect it. It's this kind of automated way of working, and still, of course, like I'm trying to put on the glasses of like the imminent doom kind of scenario, looking at things for the last time, looking at things while they're disappearing, but I also try to leave it to accident and not a lot.
Time?
Not a lot, unfortunately. I have 3 kids, a job. I travel sometimes a week, sometimes maximum 3 weeks, but that's already like a luxury. And making the photograph happens really fast. I mean, I work with a large format camera, so I see something. By the time I put off my backpack, put the tripod, set up the camera, then already I know where I'm gonna stand, and then it's like chuck, and that goes fast. Yeah.
I am sorry, I think we need to stop here because 15 minutes are gone already. But are you doing a book signing of this book in Paris? No?
No, because I'm leaving again to Antwerp. But
you're leaving
I can
soon.
do a book
Okay.
signing later, but not
But
today.
okay, but yeah, please feel free to I don't know, find the book online, I guess,
Sure.
and be in touch with him now. Catch him if you can, and ask him any questions. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
being with us. Thanks.
Thank you.